35,000 feet above the Earth, in a pressurized tube of metal and recycled air, there is no 911. There are only the people on board. For Arthur Finch, that meant his life was in the hands of a flight crew who saw a problem where they should have seen a savior. For Dr. Alana Williams, it meant her greatest professional challenge wasn't in a pristine operating room, but in the narrow aisle of Trans-American Flight 812. She found herself fighting not just a failing heart, but a stubborn, blinding prejudice that was proving to be just as deadly. Dr. Alana Williams settled into her seat, 14B, an aisle seat in the economy plus section of the Airbus A321. The flight from Washington Dulles to San Francisco was a long one, a nearly 6-hour journey she had made countless times, but this time was different. She wasn't flying for a medical conference or a policy summit. She was flying home to see her parents for their 45th wedding anniversary. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, she was just Alana. Not Dr. Williams, the renowned cardiovascular surgeon. Not the Dr. Williams, the Surgeon General of the United States. Just Alana, a daughter in a comfortable pair of charcoal grey slacks and a simple merino wool sweater, her hair pulled back in a neat professional bun. She relished the anonymity. The past year had been a whirlwind of press conferences, congressional hearings, and public health crises. The weight of a nation's well-being was a heavy mantle, and the brief respite of being just another face in the crowd was a luxury she cherished. She placed her noise-cancelling headphones over her ears, selected a classical music playlist, and closed her eyes, hoping to drift off before the meal service began. The lead flight attendant for their section introduced herself over the PA system, with a voice that was both overly cheerful and deeply weary. "Good morning, folks, and welcome aboard Trans-American Flight 812, with non-stop service to San Francisco. My name is Brenda, and I'll be your lead flight attendant today." Alana opened one eye and glanced down the aisle. Brenda Marshall was a woman in her late 50s, with a helmet of blonde hair that seemed immune to the laws of physics, and a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. She moved with an air of practiced authority, one that came from decades of managing unruly passengers and de-escalating conflicts over reclining seats and overhead bin space. It was an authority that bordered on autocratic. An early sign of Brenda's rigid demeanor appeared just as the plane reached cruising altitude. A young man a few rows ahead of Alana pressed his call button. When Brenda arrived, her smile was a thin, tight line. "Yes." "Hi, sorry to bother you," the young man said nervously. "I was wondering if I could possibly get a glass of water. I have to take some medication." Brenda's eyes did a slow, deliberate scan of the cabin. "Sir, we will be beginning our beverage service in approximately 20 minutes, as soon as we are released by the captain. You'll be able to get your water then." "Oh, okay," he stammered. "It's just that I'm supposed to take it right about now." 20 minutes. Brenda repeated, her voice a little colder this time. She turned off his call light with a decisive click and walked away, leaving the young man looking flustered and embarrassed. Alana frowned. It was a small thing, a minor inconvenience, but it spoke volumes about Brenda's approach procedure over people control, over compassion. She made a mental note of it, a habit from a lifetime of observing human behavior, and then let it go, sinking back into the soothing strings of Vivaldi. Across the aisle from Alana sat an elderly couple, Arthur and Eleanor Finch. They looked to be in their late 70s, and from their gentle interactions, the way she rested her head on his shoulder, the way he patted her hand, it was clear they had a lifetime of affection between them. Arthur had a kind, weathered face and a shock of white hair. He was telling his wife a story, his voice a low, pleasant rumble that occasionally penetrated Alana's music. The beverage cart finally began its slow journey down the aisle. When it reached Alana, she requested a bottle of water. When it reached the Finches, Arthur ordered a tomato juice and a coffee for his wife. He winked at Eleanor. "Living on the edge?" He chuckled. Brenda served them with a perfunctory smile before moving on. The flight settled into a monotonous rhythm, the hum of the engines, the clinking of ice in plastic cups, the low murmur of conversations. Alana managed to doze for about an hour, a light, dreamless sleep. She was awakened by a sudden, sharp gasp. Her eyes snapped open. The gasp had come from across the aisle. Eleanor Finch was sitting bolt upright, her face a mask of terror. Her husband Arthur was slumped in his seat. His face was pale, beaded with sweat, and his hand was clutching his chest. His breath came in ragged, shallow pants. "Arthur!" Eleanor cried out, her voice trembling. "Arthur, what's wrong?" He couldn't answer. He just gritted his teeth, a low groan escaping his lips. Alana was out of her seat in an instant. Her training, her instincts, the Hippocratic oath that was etched into her very soul, all took over. The anonymity she had craved just moments before vanished, burned away by the urgency of the situation. She knelt in the aisle beside Arthur's seat, her mind already running through a differential diagnosis. Pale skin, profuse sweating, clutching the chest shortness of breath, the classic, terrifying signs of a major cardiac event. "Ma'am, I'm a doctor," Alana said to Eleanor, her voice calm and steady, a stark contrast to the panic rising in the woman's eyes. "Can you tell me if he has a history of heart problems?" Eleanor, her hands fluttering helplessly, could only nod. Yes. He had a bypass surgery about 5 years ago. He takes medication. Oh God, Arthur." "Okay, stay calm," Alana instructed gently, her fingers already on Arthur's wrist, searching for a pulse. It was there, but it was thready and dangerously fast. His skin was clammy to the touch. "Sir, my name is Dr. Williams. Can you hear me? Can you tell me what you're feeling?" Arthur's eyes fluttered open. "Chest pain," he managed to rasp. "Like an elephant is sitting on me." He gasped for air. "Can't breathe." The textbook description of a myocardial infarction, a heart attack, at 35,000 feet. Eleanor pressed the flight attendant call button frantically. The ding echoed in the suddenly quiet cabin. Passengers were starting to turn in their seats, their faces etched with concern and morbid curiosity. A junior flight attendant, a young man named Mark with a kind but nervous face, arrived first. "What's going on?" he asked, his eyes wide. "My husband," Eleanor cried. "He can't breathe." Before Mark could react, Brenda Marshall appeared, her expression one of extreme annoyance. "What is all the commotion?" she demanded, pushing past Mark. She saw Alana kneeling in the aisle, and her eyes narrowed. "Ma'am, please return to your seat. We need to keep the aisle clear." "This man is having a medical emergency," Alana said, not looking up from Arthur. "His name is Arthur. He's having a heart attack. We need to get the onboard medical kit. Now. And we need to inform the pilot. We may need to divert." Brenda stared at Alana, a flicker of disbelief and suspicion crossing her face. She looked at Alana's simple sweater and slacks, her unadorned face, and saw not a medical professional, but a passenger overstepping her bounds. "Ma'am, I will handle this," she said icily. "Please return to your seat. You are interfering." Interfering. Alana looked up, her calm demeanor finally cracking with a flash of incredulity. "I'm a doctor. This man needs immediate medical attention, the kind you can't provide. Where is your emergency kit? Does it have aspirin?" Brenda crossed her arms. Her authority had been challenged, and she reacted with textbook defensiveness. "Are you a doctor?" she asked, her tone dripping with skepticism. "Do you have a medical license, or some form of identification with you. Alana's heart sank. Her credentials, her ID, everything that screamed Surgeon General of the United States was tucked away in her official briefcase in the overhead bin. Her wallet in her purse contained only her driver's license and credit cards. In her effort to be anonymous, she had rendered herself officially invisible. My credentials are in my bag in the overhead. Alana said, her voice tight with rising frustration. But we don't have time for that. This man is in critical distress. Every second we waste talking is a second his heart muscle is dying. I need aspirin oxygen and to know if you have an automated external defibrillator, an AED on this plane. Brenda's lips thinned into a bloodless line. We have procedures, ma'am. We can't just have a passenger who claims to be a doctor start treating people. We will page for a doctor on board, and we will follow our protocol. She turned to the younger flight attendant. Mark, get on the PA. Ask if there is a licensed medical professional on board, and patch a call through to Medlink on the ground. But she said she's a doctor. Eleanor Finch wailed, her face streaked with tears. Please just let her help him. We will find a verified professional, madam, Brenda said, her voice condescendingly placating. She shot a venomous glare at Alana. Until then, I must ask you again to return to your seat. You are making the situation worse. The sheer bureaucratic absurdity of it was staggering. Alana was the chief medical officer of the entire country, and she was being blocked from saving a man's life by a flight attendant on a power trip. As Mark's nervous voice crackled over the intercom, asking for medical assistance, Alana looked at Arthur's ashen face and knew that protocol and procedure were about to kill him. The request over the PA system hung in the air, a surreal echo of the very statement Alana had just made. If there is a doctor, nurse, or any certified medical professional on board, please identify yourself to the cabin crew by pressing your call button. Alana pressed her call button, the light above 14B glowing like a beacon of futility. Brenda ignored it. Her focus was entirely on following her script. While Mark was on the phone, presumably trying to connect to the Medlink service, a ground-based medical support team, Brenda retrieved a small first aid kit, the kind designed for scrapes and minor burns, not catastrophic cardiac events. Brenda, she's a doctor, Mark hissed, returning from the galley, his face pale. We should be listening to her. We don't know that, Brenda snapped back in a harsh whisper, loud enough for Alana to hear. She has no proof. For all we know, she's some hysterical woman who watched a few medical dramas on TV. Our liability, Mark. Think of the airline's liability. We follow the book. The book keeps us safe. The book was actively endangering Arthur Finch. His breathing grew more shallow, his lips taking on a terrifying bluish tint. Cyanosis, a clear sign of oxygen deprivation. Alana knew his window of survival was closing with terrifying speed. He needs 4 baby aspirin to chew right now, Alana said, her voice cutting through Brenda's self-important instructions. It could help break up the clot in his coronary artery. Do you have aspirin in that kit? Brenda shot her a withering look. We are not authorized to dispense medication. That is for Medlink to decide. Medlink isn't here. Alana's voice rose sharp with urgency. I am his heart is failing. We need to get him lying flat in the aisle to improve blood flow to his brain. Help me move him. She moved to gently ease Arthur out of his seat, but Brenda physically stepped in her way, placing a stiff arm on her shoulder. Ma'am, I will not warn you again. If you do not return to your seat and cease interfering with my crew, I will have you restrained for the remainder of this flight, and you will be met by law enforcement upon our arrival in San Francisco. The threat was so outrageous, so disconnected from the life-or-death reality playing out in front of her, that Alana was momentarily stunned into silence. Around them, other passengers were watching their reactions, a mixture of fear and confusion. An impeccably dressed woman in the row behind Cynthia leaned forward. "You should listen to her," Cynthia said, her voice dripping with disdain as she looked at Alana. "She's the flight attendant. She knows what she's doing. You're just causing a scene and making things worse for that poor man." The comment stung, not because it was personal, but because it reinforced the wall of ignorance Alana was fighting against. To Cynthia and to Brenda, she was invisible. Her expertise, her decades of training, her position at the pinnacle of American medicine, all of it erased by their preconceived notions. They saw a black woman in casual clothes, and their minds filled in the rest of the story, a story that did not include the words, "eminent surgeon." Just then, Mark hurried back, holding the cabin phone. "Brenda Medlink is on the line. They want to know the patient's vitals." "Finally," Brenda said, snatching the phone. She began relaying information in a clipped official tone. "Yes, we have a male passenger, approximately late 70s, complaining of chest pain." Alana listened, her horror growing. Brenda had no idea what she was doing. She wasn't a medical professional. She couldn't take a pulse, accurately couldn't describe the quality of his respirations, couldn't interpret the color of his skin. She was a terrified bureaucrat, reading from a script to a doctor miles away, while a living, breathing, dying man was right in front of them. "Ask them what they think about aspirin," Alana pleaded, trying a different tack. "Ask them if a 310 lauvenal dose is recommended for a suspected MI." Brenda held up a hand to silence her, turning her back pointedly. "Hold on," she said into the phone, her voice syrupy sweet. "I have a rather agitated passenger here who seems to think she's a doctor. It's making it very difficult to assess the patient." That was it. The final straw. The casual, dismissive cruelty of that statement, the way Brenda was painting her as the problem, while Arthur Finch was slipping away, ignited a cold fire in Alana's belly. Protocol was failing. Reason was failing. The only thing left was action. She ignored Brenda and turned to Eleanor. "Does he have any nitroglycerin pills? A prescription? Did his doctor give him anything for chest pain?" Eleanor's eyes widened in sudden realization. Yes, in his coat pocket. He always carries it. She fumbled in the pocket of the jacket draped over the seat and produced a small brown vial. Alana took it, her hands moving with practiced speed. She checked the label. Nitroglycerin. It could help dilate the blood vessels and ease the strain on his heart. "How many has he taken?" Alana asked. "None, it just happened so fast," Eleanor sobbed. "Okay, we're going to place one under his tongue." As Alana moved to administer the tiny pill, Brenda ended her call and spun around. "What do you think you're doing? You cannot give him that. That is a prescription drug." "It's his prescription drug," Alana retorted, her patience completely gone. "And if he doesn't get it, he may die right here in this aisle while you're on the phone discussing liability." She managed to slip the pill under Arthur's tongue, just as his eyes rolled back in his head and his body went limp. His jaw went slack. The rasping breaths stopped. Alana's fingers flew to his neck, pressing against his carotid artery. Nothing. No pulse. "He's in cardiac arrest," she announced, her voice, devoid of all emotion, replaced by the chillingly calm tone of a surgeon in crisis. "He's gone into V-fib. Get the AED. Now move." The command was so absolute, so filled with unquestionable authority, that for a moment even Brenda was frozen in shock. The illusion of her control had been shattered by the raw, terrifying reality of death. The words, "cardiac arrest," jolted the cabin. Panic, once a low hum, began to crescendo. Eleanor Finch let out a heartbreaking scream. Mark, the junior attendant, looked as if he was about to be sick. Only Brenda remained frozen, her face a bizarre collage of fear, fury, and disbelief. "Did you hear me?" Alana's voice was like a whip crack. "AED now, or he will be brain dead in 4 minutes, and completely dead in 8. Go!" The command finally broke through Mark's paralysis. He scrambled toward the galley where the emergency equipment was stored. Brenda, however, seemed to root herself to the spot, her pride wrestling with the dawning horror of the situation. "You don't know what you're doing," she whispered the accusation, sounding hollow, even to her own ears. "I have done this hundreds of times," Alana said, her focus entirely on Arthur. "I have held hearts in my hands. Now get out of my way." With surprising strength, Alana and another male passenger, a young man named David, who had been watching with growing alarm, managed to carefully maneuver Arthur's limp body out of the cramped seat and onto the floor of the aisle. It was a clumsy, difficult process in the confined space. "I need his shirt off," Alana commanded. David didn't hesitate, working quickly to unbutton Arthur's shirt, exposing his pale, still chest. Alana positioned her hands one over the other in the center of his sternum. "I'm starting compressions. I need someone to manage his airway." She looked directly at Brenda. "Tilt his head back and lift his chin. When I tell you, you will give 2 breaths." Brenda stared blankly, completely out of her depth. Alana didn't have time to wait. She began the chest compressions, a brutal, rhythmic pumping that was violent, yet life-giving. The counting was automatic, a metronome burned into her brain by years of training. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. The force required was immense, and she poured all her strength into it, her arms acting as pistons. Mark returned, fumbling with a red case containing the automated external defibrillator. He dropped to his knees beside Alana. I've only ever done the training on a dummy." He stammered, his hands shaking as he opened the case. "Just open it and turn it on," Alana ordered, not missing a single compression. "It will talk you through it. Take out the pads." The machine whirred to life, its synthesized voice filling the tense silence. "Apply pads to patient's bare chest." Mark peeled the backing off the large, sticky pads. The machine showed a diagram of where they needed to go, one on the upper right side of the chest, the other on the lower left side of the rib cage. He applied them, his hands still trembling. "Analyzing heart rhythm," the AED announced. "Do not touch the patient." Alana pulled her hands away, breathing heavily. Every eye in the vicinity was glued to the small box. For a few agonizing seconds, the only sound was the hum of the engines and the electronic whir of the machine. "Shock advised," the voice declared. "Charging. Stand clear. Do not touch the patient." A high-pitched whine began as the machine charged its capacitor. Alana scanned the area, her eyes locking with Brenda's, with Eleanor's, with David's. "Everybody clear," she yelled. They all nodded, recoiling slightly. "Press the orange button now to deliver shock," the machine instructed. Alana pressed the flashing button. Arthur's body arched violently off the floor, a single convulsive jolt before falling back. It was a ghastly, unnatural movement. Eleanor stifled a sob. "Shock delivered," the AED stated. "Begin CPR." Without hesitation, Alana was back on his chest, resuming the grueling compressions. "We need to keep going," she panted. The shock may have reset his rhythm, but his heart is too weak to pump on its own yet. We need to do the work for it. They fell into a desperate rhythm. 2 minutes of non-stop CPR, then the AED would analyze again. The cycle repeated. No shock advised. More CPR. The minutes stretched into an eternity. Alana's arms burned, sweat dripped from her forehead, but she didn't slow. She was in the zone, a place of pure medical focus, where the rest of the world faded away. After the second cycle of CPR, as the AED began its analysis again, Brenda finally found her voice. Medlink said, "They said we should wait for their instructions." Alana looked at her, her eyes blazing with a fire that made Brenda flinch. "Medlink is not performing CPR. Medlink is not breathing for him. Medlink cannot feel that his body is getting colder. I am here, and I am telling you what needs to be done. We are his only chance." "Shock advised," the machine announced again. "Clear," Alana yelled. Again she pressed the button. Again Arthur's body jolted. She immediately went to check for a pulse, her fingers pressing against his neck. She felt it. A flicker. Weak, erratic, but it was there. It was a pulse. "I've got a rhythm," she said, a wave of relief washing over her. "It's weak, but it's there. Mark, get the oxygen mask from the kit. Let's get it on him." Mark complied instantly, fumbling with the small green oxygen tank. As he fitted the mask over Arthur's face, the old man's eyelids fluttered. A faint, shuddering breath escaped his lips, fogging the clear plastic. He was alive. He was breathing on his own. A collective gasp of relief went through the passengers who had been watching. Eleanor was weeping openly, but now her tears were of gratitude. But Alana knew this was only a temporary victory. He was stabilized but profoundly unstable. He had survived the cardiac arrest, but he was still in the midst of a massive heart attack. He needed a cardiac cath lab, advanced drugs, and an ICU. He needed a hospital, and he needed one within the hour. She stood up, her body aching, and faced Brenda, who was now staring at Arthur's breathing form as if she had seen a ghost. "Now," Alana said, her voice low and dangerously calm, "you are going to get the pilot on the radio. You are going to tell him what happened. And you are going to tell him that we need to divert this plane to the nearest major city with a level 1 trauma center. Not in 10 minutes. Not after you consult a manual. Now." Brenda stared at Alana, her face a pale, slack mask of shock. The entire event had unfolded in a way that shattered her worldview. Her rigid adherence to protocol had been proven not just wrong, but nearly fatal. The woman she had dismissed, threatened, and obstructed had single-handedly pulled a man back from the brink of death. The power dynamic in the narrow airplane aisle had irrevocably shifted. I have to inform the captain." Brenda stammered the words, sounding hollow and automatic. She was falling back on the language of her job, the only thing she had left. "Yes, you do." Alana affirmed, her calm composure, a stark contrast to Brenda's unraveling state. "You will tell him that a passenger has been successfully resuscitated following a witnessed cardiac arrest. You will tell him the patient has a pulse but remains critically unstable. And you will tell him we require immediate diversion for definitive medical care." Brenda nodded numbly and turned to go to the interphone, but Alana wasn't finished. "One more thing," Alana added, her voice dropping to an almost conversational tone, yet carrying an immense weight. "You will also tell him that the physician who managed the situation has determined that any delay could be catastrophic for the patient's long-term prognosis, particularly his neurological function." This was a calculated move. Alana was framing the command in medical terms the pilot, and by extension, the airline, couldn't legally or morally ignore. She was creating an unimpeachable record of her professional recommendation. As Brenda hurried toward the front of the cabin, a ripple of quiet applause broke out among the nearby passengers. David, the young man who had helped, reached out and touched Alana's arm. "That was incredible," he said, his voice filled with awe. "You saved his life." Alana gave him a weary but grateful smile. "We all did. She knelt again beside Arthur, monitoring his pulse and breathing, while Eleanor held her husband's hand, murmuring his name over and over. Minutes crawled by. The plane continued its smooth flight path west with no discernible change in direction or altitude. A knot of anxiety began to tighten in Alana's stomach. What was happening in the cockpit? Was Brenda relaying the information correctly? Or was she trying to downplay the severity to somehow save face and avoid the massive operational and financial headache of an emergency diversion? Mark approached her carrying a bottle of water. "Here, Doctor," he said, his voice full of a newfound respect. "You should drink this. Brenda is talking to Captain Davis." He hesitated, then leaned in closer. "I'm so sorry. I knew you were right. You did the right thing by getting the equipment," Alana reassured him. "Right now, we just need to get this plane on the ground." Just then, Brenda returned. Her face was grim-set in hard lines of defiance. It was a look Alana found utterly incomprehensible. "The captain is aware of the situation," Brenda announced formally. "He has been in contact with Medlink. Based on their information, and the fact that the passenger is now stable, we will be continuing on to San Francisco. They believe it's best not to cause a panic or a major disruption." Alana stood up slowly, her exhaustion momentarily forgotten, replaced by a surge of pure, cold fury. She couldn't believe what she was hearing. "Stable, sir," she said, her voice dangerously quiet. Brenda the man's heart stopped. "I manually pumped it for him for over 5 minutes. He received 2 defibrillator shocks. He is the furthest thing from stable. He is on a razor's edge. He needs a hospital. He needed one 10 minutes ago. The captain has made his decision based on the advice of the medical service the airline contracts for these exact situations." Brenda recited, clinging to her procedural shield. "They have the flight manifest the equipment list. They have the full picture." "Do they have a medical license more advanced than mine?" Alana shot back. "Do they have their hands on the patient? Do they know that his pulse is irregular and his blood pressure is likely in the gutter? Continuing to San Francisco is not a medical decision. It's a financial one. And it is a death sentence for that man." "There is nothing more to discuss," Brenda said, crossing her arms. "The decision has been made." Alana looked from Brenda's stubborn face to Arthur's fragile form, to Eleanor's tear-streaked hope. She had done everything she could as a doctor. Now it was time to do what she had to do as the Surgeon General. She had avoided this, had craved the anonymity, but these people with their pride and their foolish rules had left her no choice. She looked Brenda directly in the eye. Her voice was calm, clear and resonant, with an authority that had nothing to do with medicine and everything to do with the full power of the United States government. "Brenda, give me the interphone. I need to speak to Captain Davies directly." "Absolutely not," Brenda scoffed. "Passengers are never permitted to speak with the flight crew during—" "This is not a request," Alana interrupted, her voice cutting through the air like steel. "You have failed to accurately convey the gravity of this medical emergency. Your actions have endangered a passenger's life. You have obstructed a physician in the act of providing life-saving care. You are now a party to gross negligence. So you are going to go back to that phone, and you are going to tell Captain Robert Davis that he has 2 choices. He can speak to Dr. Alana Williams now, or he can speak to her later, in a formal deposition with the FAA and the National Transportation Safety Board. The choice is his." Brenda's jaw dropped. The use of the captain's full name, the casual authoritative mention of federal agencies, it was a sudden, shocking escalation. Who do you think you are?" Alana took a deep breath. The moment had come. "I am Dr. Alana Williams," she said, her voice ringing with clarity in the silent cabin. and I am the Surgeon General of the United States. Your airline is at this moment interfering with a federal officer in the performance of her duties. Now get me the captain." The silence that followed Alana's declaration was absolute. It was as if the hum of the engines themselves had momentarily ceased. The passengers who had witnessed the entire drama stared their mouths agape. Eleanor Finch looked up, her expression of gratitude deepening into one of pure awe. Mark, the junior flight attendant, looked like he might faint, but all eyes were on Brenda Marshall. The color drained from her face, leaving a pasty grey pallor beneath her foundation. The helmet of blonde hair suddenly seemed ridiculous, a cheap crown for a queen who had just been dethroned. Her carefully constructed world of rules, seniority, and absolute cabin authority had just been vaporized. She was staring at a woman she had dismissed, insulted, and physically blocked a woman who held one of the highest medical offices in the nation. The chasm between her perception and reality was so vast she couldn't seem to process it. "Surgeon General," Brenda whispered the words, catching in her throat. "Yes," Alana confirmed, her patience worn paper-thin. "And for the last time, this man needs a hospital. He has at best a 90-minute window before the damage to his heart becomes largely irreversible. We have already wasted nearly 20 minutes. Your pilot is flying this plane, but I am in charge of this man's life. You are going to patch me through to the cockpit, or I promise you, the consequences will be severe, and they will be immediate." This was no longer a negotiation. It was a direct order, backed by an authority Brenda could not comprehend, but could no longer deny. Her mind raced, replaying every moment of the last half hour, her skepticism, her condescending tone, her demand for credentials, her threat to have Alana restrained. Each memory was a fresh wave of horror. She had not only been wrong, she had been catastrophically, career-endingly wrong. Without another word, Brenda turned and practically ran to the galley, snatching the interphone. Her hand trembled as she pressed the button to call the cockpit. "Captain Davis," she said, her voice a reedy, panicked squeak. You need to speak with the doctor on board. Immediately." There was a pause, and even from a distance, Alana could hear the pilot's tinny, annoyed voice squawk a reply. "No, sir, you don't understand," Brenda said, her voice cracking. She says she is the Surgeon General of the United States." The silence from the cockpit was longer this time. When Captain Davies's voice returned, it was stripped of all its earlier annoyance, replaced with a crisp, alert professionalism. A moment later, Mark approached Alana, holding out a fresh handset. "The captain—" "For you, ma'am," he said, avoiding her eyes. Alana took the phone. "This is Dr. Williams." "Dr. Williams, this is Captain Davis. What is the situation?" His voice was all business. "Captain, I have a male passenger, late 70s, who suffered a witnessed cardiac arrest secondary to a suspected acute myocardial infarction. He was successfully resuscitated after 2 shocks from the AED and multiple rounds of CPR. He has regained a pulse and spontaneous respirations, but he remains in critical condition. He is hypertensive and experiencing arrhythmia. He is, to be blunt, a ticking time bomb." Alana's delivery was flawless, a concise, professional, no-nonsense medical report. "I understand, Doctor," the captain replied. "The flight attendant reported he was stable." The flight attendant is not a medical professional, and her assessment was dangerously inaccurate, Alana said coolly. "Captain, I am formally advising you that as the senior medical authority on this aircraft, it is my professional judgment that this aircraft must divert to the nearest suitable airport for emergency medical services. Continuing to our scheduled destination will likely result in a catastrophic and preventable loss of life." "Do you understand?" "Yes, Doctor." Understood completely. The reply was instantaneous. There was no hesitation. We are currently over the plains of western Nebraska. The closest major airport with the facilities you'll need is Denver International. We can be on the ground in approximately 40 minutes. I'm turning the plane now. I will declare an emergency to get immediate clearance for landing. Paramedics will meet us at the gate. Thank you, Captain, Alana said. That's the correct decision. No, Doctor. Captain Davies's voice came back, tinged with a new grave seriousness. Thank you, and my apologies for the delay. Alana handed the phone back to Mark. A few moments later, a subtle but definite shift in the plane's movement could be felt as the massive aircraft began a wide banking turn to the south. The tension in the cabin, which had been stretched to a breaking point, finally snapped. Brenda Marshall was leaning against the galley wall, her face buried in her hands. Her career, she knew, was over. But more than that, the sheer weight of what she had almost caused the death of a man through her own stubborn pride and prejudice was crashing down on her. Alana returned to Arthur's side. He was conscious now, his eyes open, and aware, though he was still weak. Eleanor was stroking his forehead, tears of relief streaming down her face. She looked up at Alana, her eyes shining with a reverence that made Alana uncomfortable. You saved him, Eleanor whispered. You are an angel. I'm just a doctor doing my job, Alana said gently. But she knew in this moment it was more than that. She had been forced to use the power of her office, not for policy, not for public health, but for a single precious life. And in doing so, she had exposed a sickness far more common than any virus, the quiet, insidious poison of judging a person not by their skill or their character, but by the color of their skin. The descent into Denver was rapid and efficient. Captain Davies's voice came over the PA system, calm and authoritative, informing the passengers that, due to a medical emergency, they were diverting and would be landing shortly. He asked everyone to return to their seats and fasten their seat belts. There was no mention of the drama, no hint of the conflict that had transpired. It was a sterile professional announcement that belied the life and death struggle that had prompted it. As the plane prepared for its final approach, Alana gave quiet instructions to Mark and David, who had become her de facto medical assistants. They propped Arthur up slightly to ease his breathing and ensured the oxygen line remained secure. Alana knelt in the aisle, never taking her fingers far from his wrist, monitoring his pulse. She spoke to him in a low, reassuring voice, telling him where they were going, and that an ambulance crew would be waiting for him. Brenda Marshall was nowhere to be seen. After the captain's announcement, she had retreated to the rear galley and had not emerged. The other flight attendants, their faces a mixture of fear and respect, gave Alana a wide berth, responding to any of her requests instantly. The hierarchy of the cabin had been rewritten. The moment the plane's wheels touched the tarmac at Denver International Airport, a phalanx of emergency vehicles could be seen speeding across the airfield to meet them. The aircraft didn't even taxi to a regular gate. It was directed to a hardstand, a remote parking area on the tarmac, where the ambulance could pull right up to the door. Before the engines had fully spooled down, the main cabin door was opened. A team of 6 paramedics, laden with gear, stormed up the stairs. The lead paramedic, a burly man named Jeff, made a beeline for the aisle where Alana was kneeling. "We were told there was a VIP doctor on board," he said, his eyes quickly assessing Arthur. "Are you the one who managed the code?" "I am," Alana said, immediately shifting into professional handoff mode. "This is Arthur Finch, late 70s history of coronary artery bypass grafting. Witnessed cardiac arrest approximately 45 minutes ago. He was in V-fib, received 2 shocks, resuscitated, and has maintained a sinus rhythm since, but he's showing frequent, premature ventricular contractions. I administered 1 sublingual nitro and got him on oxygen. His pulse is 90 and thready respirations are 22. He's alert, but lethargic. The paramedic team was stunned by the concise and expert report. This was the handoff they dreamed of getting. Understood, Doctor. Incredible work. Jeff and his team moved with practiced efficiency, transferring Arthur to a portable stretcher, hooking him up to their own monitors and IV lines. As they carefully maneuvered the stretcher toward the open door, Eleanor paused beside Alana. She gripped Alana's hand with both of hers. "I will never ever be able to thank you enough," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "You didn't just save my husband, you saved my life." Alana squeezed her hand back. "You just focus on him. He's in good hands now." As the ambulance crew disappeared down the stairs, 2 new figures appeared at the cabin door. They were not paramedics. They wore dark suits and the serious, impassive expressions of airline executives. Behind them stood a uniformed official from the Federal Aviation Administration. The Karma for Flight 812 had arrived before the passengers had even deplaned. One of the executives, a man with a name tag that read, "Daniel Potter, Director of In-Flight Services," approached Alana. "Dr. Williams?" he asked, his voice low and deeply respectful. "I am so terribly sorry for what you experienced on this flight. We were alerted by Captain Davies. Is there anything at all we can do for you?" Alana looked past him, her gaze settling on the doorway to the galley where Brenda was still hiding. "The situation was handled," she said evenly. "But it was handled in spite of, not because of your lead flight attendant. Her conduct was not just unprofessional, it was dangerous. She repeatedly obstructed medical care in a life-or-death situation based on what I can only assume were her own personal biases." Potter's face tightened. "I assure you, Doctor, a full investigation will be launched immediately. Captain Davies and the entire cabin crew will be grounded pending the outcome." Alana nodded. "See that it is." She had no desire for vengeance, only for accountability. An error in judgment was one thing. An error born of prejudice was a systemic failure that needed to be rooted out. As other passengers were finally allowed to deplane onto buses that would take them to the terminal, Alana saw Captain Davies emerge from the cockpit. He was a man in his early 60s with a distinguished, authoritative air that was now clouded with deep concern. He walked directly to her. "Dr. Williams," he said, extending a hand. "Robert Davies, on behalf of my crew, I want to apologize. I relied on the information I was given by my lead attendant. That was my mistake. I am the captain of this ship, and the ultimate responsibility is mine. I should have questioned her report more thoroughly." "There is no excuse." Alana shook his hand. It was a sincere apology, and she accepted it. "You made the right call when it counted, Captain. That's what matters for Mr. Finch." As she finally walked down the stairs onto the tarmac, the crisp Colorado air, a welcome change from the stale, charged atmosphere of the cabin, Alana knew this was far from over. The story of what happened on Flight 812 would not be contained. It was a story about more than just one Flight 1 passenger and one heroic doctor. It was a story about the quiet, dangerous assumptions people make every day and the extraordinary moments that expose them for all the world to see. The fallout from Trans-American Flight 812 was swift and decisive. The incident involving the Surgeon General of the United States could not be quietly swept under the rug. Within hours, it was a breaking news story. The narrative was electrifying. A top government official, flying incognito, saves a man's life at 35,000 feet while battling an obstructionist flight crew. Trans-American Airways went into full crisis management mode. Their CEO issued a public statement, which was read live on every major news network. It lauded Dr. Alana Williams as a national hero and offered a profound, unequivocal apology for the unacceptable and deeply regrettable actions of their employee. The Finch family was contacted, and the airline assured them that all of Arthur's extensive medical bills would be covered, along with a substantial settlement for the emotional distress caused. An internal investigation, conducted with oversight from the FAA, was concluded in record time. The testimony from passengers, especially from David and a handful of others who had a clear view of the events, was damning. They corroborated every detail of Alana's account: Brenda's immediate dismissiveness, her refusal to listen, her physical obstruction, and her threat to have the doctor restrained. Mark, the junior flight attendant, gave a tearful and honest account of Brenda's behavior and his own fear to intervene more forcefully. The consequences were severe. Brenda Marshall was terminated from Trans-American Airways, a career of over 30 years ending in disgrace. The FAA opened its own investigation into her conduct, which resulted in the permanent revocation of her flight attendant certificate for endangering passenger safety. She became a pariah in the industry, a case study used in training manuals for what not to do in an emergency. The media portrayed her as a villain, a flight attendant Karen, and while Alana took no pleasure in the public shaming, she knew that the visibility of the consequences was necessary to prevent it from happening again. Captain Robert Davies received a formal reprimand and was suspended for 3 months without pay. The investigation determined that while he acted swiftly, once he had the correct information, his initial failure to question his lead attendant's biased and incomplete report constituted a serious lapse in command judgment. He accepted the punishment without complaint, later stating in an internal memo to other pilots that the incident was a wake-up call to always question, always verify, and never let a single point of communication be a single point of failure. For Alana, the days that followed were a whirlwind. Her planned quiet family visit became a media event. She gave one press conference at the hospital in Denver, where Arthur Finch was recovering. He had undergone a successful emergency angioplasty and was expected to make a full recovery thanks to the immediate CPR and defibrillation he received on the plane. Standing beside a grateful Eleanor Finch, Alana didn't speak about Brenda or the airline. She spoke about the importance of CPR training for everyone. She spoke about implicit bias, not as a tool for blame, but as a hidden danger that can affect decision-making in critical moments. She turned a personal ugly incident into a national teaching moment. Heroes don't always wear uniforms or capes, she said, her voice steady and clear. Sometimes they are ordinary people who are empowered with the knowledge to act, and sometimes the greatest barrier to saving a life isn't a medical condition, but a closed mind. Let's work on opening those. The airline, spurred by the immense negative publicity and a direct consultation with Dr. Williams's office, announced a complete overhaul of its in-flight medical emergency training. The Dr. Alana Williams Protocol, as it unofficially became known, was implemented. It mandated enhanced, scenario-based medical training for all flight attendants, focusing on rapid identification of cardiac events. Most importantly, it established a new, crystal-clear policy. If a passenger identifies themselves as a medical professional during an emergency, their assistance is to be accepted immediately and without question, while credentials are to be verified later once the patient is stable. The old culture of liability first was replaced by a new one of life first. Months later, Alana received a letter. It was from Brenda Marshall. It was not an excuse or a plea for sympathy. It was a raw, painful, and deeply sincere apology. She wrote that the incident had forced her to confront a prejudice she never realized she harbored. She was in therapy, trying to understand the roots of her own bias. She ended the letter by saying, "You didn't just save that man's life, Dr. Williams. In a strange way, you saved mine. You forced me to see a part of myself that I was blind to, and I will spend the rest of my life trying to be a better person because of it." Alana folded the letter, a sense of somber resolution settling over her. The hard karma had fallen, but perhaps in the end it had cleared the way for a lesson to be learned, a lesson that would echo far beyond the confines of Flight 812, reminding the world that the person you overlook might just be the one person you cannot afford to ignore. Dr. Alana Williams's heroism wasn't just in her medical skill, it was in her unwavering perseverance in the face of blinding prejudice. She refused to be silenced, refused to be dismissed, and in doing so, she saved a life and forced an entire industry to confront a critical flaw. The story of Flight 812 is a stark reminder that our assumptions can have life or death consequences, and that the person we are quickest to judge might be the very hero we need. It proves that true authority comes not from a uniform or a title, but from knowledge, integrity, and the courage to act. If this story of justice and accountability moved you, please hit that like button to show your support. Share it with someone who needs to hear this powerful message, and be sure to subscribe to our channel for more incredible stories of karma and redemption. What would you have done in this situation? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below.